Just like that, the event is scheduled for tomorrow, Apple's peak event. So what I wanted to make this content on today is what I'm expecting to see, the performance I hope to see, and stuff of that nature. Without further ado, let's talk about what is expected. First off the boat from the rumor mill, they are expecting a Mac Mini refresh, something to either be a Mac Mini Pro update or something called Mac Studio. Regardless of what they end up calling it, I just feel like this is going to be a basic update to the M1 Pro, M1 Max, or they might even toss in the M2 that is going to be announced probably for the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. Now, I think that with the confusing naming structure that might happen with the MacBook, Mac Minis and stuff of that nature, it remains to be seen whether they're going to put in the M1 Pro or M2. So depending on what they do this year, it could get confusing for some people on what to expect. What they'll have to do is basically probably refresh the M1 Mini to be the M2 and then speak about how the Pro and the M1 Max Pro could probably go to the M1 Mini. See, I'm getting confused with all of this numbers as well. But basically, I expect the Pro version of the Mini to have the Max and the Pro, and then the regular Mac Mini to just stick with an M2 or something to that effect. There have been some rumored efficiency or guesses on what the multi-core speed would be. Probably, like, according to some guesses, a minimal bump. But there are rumors that it's going to have at least 2 more GPUs, up from 8 GPUs to having a standard 10. So that may help in some streaming performance, OBS performance, or hopefully maybe even just having multi-monitor support. So we are expecting better performance. I mean, honestly, what I'd like to see is just having the multi-monitor support, being able to stream OBS, record OBS 1080p 60 frames per second. And, I don't expect it to be as great as the M1 Pro, obviously, but maybe even just have better battery performance would be awesome. So with this chipset that can help with the, MacBook Air that might come out, or maybe even the refreshed MacBook Pro, which I'm about to talk about. But in terms of just the chip, and if it goes into the Mac Mini, this is what you could expect to see. Based on what the polls from the 9 to 5 Mac say, lots of people want to see a 27-inch iMac replacement. Honestly, I don't see this being any different than what the Mac Mini would entail in this announcement. It would probably just have the same either M1 Pro or M1 Max. They might even throw an M2 version in there. But honestly, I don't see anything drastically changing just because the chassis is different. I think you'll still have kind of the same colors, possibly the same type of design, but just have better performance. Maybe they announce the 27-inch iMac Pro that has the M1 Max or Pros, but really I don't see it being any different than what the M1 Mac Mini rumors would be, or anything out of the ordinary of what the performance would be. Really, what I also expect to see is the MacBook Pro and MacBook Air get refreshed. I'm not exactly sure, and I highly doubt they're going to refresh the MacBook Air with the mini LED, or some of the rumors that it might be a 14-inch. I'm hoping they might put a 16-inch, but what I really just expect them to do is just refresh the MacBook, with the M2. I don't think they're going to put the M1 Max or M1 Pro into this chassis, and they'll just put the M2 with the maybe a 9-core and a 10-core option, and you'll have what the option is or not. So that's really what I'm expecting. You could have seen from the previous years benchmarks that the MacBook Pro kind of does a little bit better than the MacBook Air because of the fans. But really, if you're just going to be entry level, there's no reason why you shouldn't choose the MacBook Air. And especially if it gets the M2 with a 10-core GPU version. That slight bump in GPU might allow you finally to, last year couldn't do 1080p on OBS. Hopefully this year it can. So really with that, I think that's what we'll expect to see with this year's Apple event, or at least for tomorrow's event. They're just really announcing the M2, and then I'm just interested to see what they do with putting in M1 Pro or M1 Max into the devices.